We're going to take a few minutes now to talk about one of our most interesting presidents in American history. Also, he probably embodies the spirit of the progressive era better than any other individual, Teddy Roosevelt. There are a few videos that you're going to watch, so I'll do my best to keep this brief and let those videos fill in some of the other details. Roosevelt had a number of positions prior to becoming vice president and then president, but his most recent was that of the governor of New York. As governor of New York, Roosevelt really ruffled some feathers of some of the bigwigs in the Republican Party because he wouldn't always toe the party line. A number of powerful Republicans, including a guy named Thomas Platt, known as Boss Platt because he led the Republican Party in New York, wanted Roosevelt out of New York politics because they couldn't control him. So while Roosevelt was contemplating a future run for the presidency, the New York Republicans pushed him to be William McKinley's vice presidential candidate in 1900. Now, Roosevelt was opposed to this because he viewed the vice presidency as a place that political careers went to die. After all, Roosevelt wanted to be president, and at that time, it had been more than 60 years since a former vice president had been elected president. However, in this instance, Roosevelt was unable to resist the will of his party, and he was selected as President McKinley's vice president for a second term in office. But just over 6 months into his second term, McKinley was assassinated, and now the man who New York Republicans had sent to D.C. in order to try to make him disappear was the President of the United States. Moving into the presidency, Roosevelt became the youngest president ever at the age of 42. John F. Kennedy is the youngest man ever elected president when he takes office at 43 years old, but Roosevelt is the youngest man to ever be in the office. And age wasn't the only thing that differentiated Roosevelt from earlier presidents. Teddy was always very active and an outdoorsman. He was loud, energetic. He loved to hunt, ride horses, even brought people to the White House to box with him. In fact, late in his presidency, he even suffered a detached retina due to a boxing injury suffered in the White House. He also loved tennis, but he did whatever he could to avoid being photographed playing tennis because it was viewed as a country club, upper-class sport, which wasn't the type of image Roosevelt wanted to portray. On the political side of things, Roosevelt's reforms became known as the Square Deal. He believed it was the government's job to act on the needs of the people regardless of cost, and that the only limit to his power to do so was if it was explicitly prohibited by the Constitution. Roosevelt became known as the Trust Buster because of the actions he took to break up powerful trusts or monopolies who used their size and power to take advantage of the public and violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. He helped break apart over 40 trusts during his time in office. Another major event during Roosevelt's time in office was the 1902 coal miners' strike in Pennsylvania, when over 140,000 coal miners went on strike starting in May. The owners and the workers were unable to come to an agreement, and as spring turned to summer and summer turned to fall, the strike became a major problem for many Americans that relied on coal to heat their homes. Despite not having any legal basis to do so, and despite members of his own administration telling him he had no right to intervene, Roosevelt did. Eventually, he even threatened to send in the military to take over the mines if the owners would not come to a solution with the workers. Finally, the workers were given a 10% pay raise. It was short of the 20% they were requesting, but the workday was also shortened from 10 to 9 hours. But really, the biggest thing that came out of this was the precedent that was set. In getting involved with a strike, Roosevelt set the example that the government would intervene when a strike threatened public safety, as this one did with winter coming. Earlier, in an earlier video, I mentioned the jungle and Roosevelt's role in the Pure Food and Drug Act as well as the Meat Inspection Act. He also worked to limit the power of the railroads by signing into law the Hepburn Act and the Elkins Act. The Hepburn Act and Elkins Act gave the Interstate Commerce Commission the right to set maximum rates for the trains, and it also limited the railroad's ability to give special rebates only to certain companies, such as the Standard Oil Company. And it eliminated free passes, which railroads often gave to politicians, kind of as a form of bribery. Teddy was also very active in regards to the environment and environmental conservation. As I mentioned earlier, Roosevelt was a big outdoorsman, and he did a lot to protect the environment. He believed that we needed to use our natural resources to build our economy and fuel our industries, but he also believed that land needed to be protected. He created the U.S. Forest Service and established 150 national forests and 5 national parks, among other conservation efforts that resulted in the protection of approximately 230 million acres of public land. With all of these reforms, from regulating industry to protecting the environment, perhaps no single individual represents the progressive era better than Theodore Roosevelt. Now, this was a pretty quick introduction, and we'll talk more about him as we go through this unit and even into the next one. But hopefully this gives a little bit of an idea of the type of guy Roosevelt was.